Welcome to welcome to another episode of the Actor's Perspective from Castle NYC. Today we're talking about Eugene Ionesco's Rhinoceros. It's a play that is based in the theater of the absurd and one of my personal favorites. So, as always, I'd like to start with just what were your initial thoughts on the play after we finished reading it?
Shio, go first.
Ah! um, I definitely, yeah, it was. I found it really interesting. The whole theme of conformity, of kind of going along with the crowd, kind of thing, and being so easily swayed to the mob mentality, kind of thing. Um, and a lot of the elements of this play kind of reminded me a bit of Kafka's Metamorphosis, where we have this individual who, like, it's a kind of after war setting, and he didn't do what other people did, which was go to the war. He chose to stay behind and work, and his family kind of judged him, and he worked himself to the point that he was so ill with TB, and like the way that society was viewing him made him kind of metamorph into this like cockroach figure. The idea of like changing physically into some sort of an animal because you're either going against the grain of what society is believing or trying to get you to basically fall into, um and you just, because you're trying to be an individual, you're seeing so opposite. So it's kind of a little bit of the opposite. Like, our main character here does not turn into an animal because he's an individual, but the elements of how people are literally metamorphing into animals because of the mainstream society thinking, like the one hive mind kind of stuff. So it gave me a lot of that feel.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. So just to give a little bit of background to those who are listening, Rhinoceros was written by Eugene Ionesco in 1959, and a lot of it is based off of his experience growing up during the height of World War II. So as you see the characters change into the rhinoceros and lose their individuality, it has always been read, and he has kind of said that it's a statement on the growth of Nazism going across Western Europe. So I think that's always a really interesting thing to bring in, to know the history of a play and where it's coming from. And one of the things I will say about it is I love that it is still relevant so much to today's society. Like, you can see so many of the things that he hits upon in the anti-vaxxer conspiracies or the QAnon conspiracies, or really any of those kind of projects that kind of remove someone's individuality and put them into a collective thought process.
I love this play. You can put it in any era, and it will resonate as truthfully in that era as it does to this moment. Like, I could easily put this in the 70s and 80s during the Cold War era. Like, if I were producing this today, putting it in a different era would be really, really fun and smart, because you can put it in that era and people will be like, yes, I don't agree with people being conforming to Nazism of now in the 2021, the year of 2021. And people will be like, well, what about X, Y, and Z? And they're like, well, I don't agree with that. Well, you're still a rhinoceros. Like, if you agree with, I'm sorry if I'm showing my true colors, Trumpism, QAnon theories, as Ethan spoke on, you're showing your true colors and showing how much of a rhinoceros you are, because there's so much conformity, as Shio put it, that is being put out there that some people clasp onto and we become guilty of. But I also think that this play could be produced incredibly well in even like a high school. The idea of conformity is something that's not just a social thing in our modern adult world, but also in a high school world. About, are you wearing these type of clothes? Like, oh, you're conforming to those type of clothes because you want to fit in with everybody. Do you have this app, or do you like this song, this artist? The idea of conformity is something that is incredibly, oh god, infectious within people and in any area of life, whether it is politics, as clearly, I won't say clearly because this is theater of the absurd, but as perceived as it is in this play, or as simple as it is in just pop culture, and how the perception of if you don't conform to what we like, how you are all of a sudden an alien or something that's outside of what we have in this world or what we like.
Yeah. So one of the things I think is super interesting that the play tackles is being close to an event or living through an event as it happens. As Barringer says in the final act when he's talking about the rhinoceros, he says, if this had happened somewhere else, we could dissect it and talk about it and figure it out. But because we're in the middle of it, we can't see it clearly. And I think um, there are other examples throughout the play. For example, the discussion at the beginning about whether it's an African or an Asiatic rhino versus where did this rhino come from?
Mm.
Like a great example of that stuff. Are there other examples you guys can think of through the play that kind of cite that same idea of like living through something versus keeping that distance?
Mm. Double checking. Sorry, I'm going.
Oh, it's okay. I realized that one. I kind of threw a wrench in that one. It was just something that I was thinking about as we talked through it. Um,
Well, I was going to say, well, off the top of my head, when in the what was it called? Like the market, I guess, where they were the
mhm.
cafe and all this stuff, um, with the cat being run over, and you have the housewife grieving her cat, and everyone just like, oh, it's okay, and it was like this like Greek chorus kind of thing going on. It was like, it's okay, have brandy, and everyone's just like, we're focusing on this, and but literally no one's talking, like they weren't so concerned about the fact the cat was run over by a rhino, but let's get the coffin and, oh, drink some brandy, lady, it's okay. And she's like, my cat, I love my cat. And like, obviously, Berenger and I forget his name,
Jean.
John. Thank you. Such a difficult name to remember. They're having the conversation about the horn, one horn versus two horns. So they're kind of addressing the rhino, but not really, like how you just said, no one's really thinking about like, where did this rhino come from? We're worried about one horn versus two horn. We're focused on this housewife whose cat was run over by a rhino. And that's where our focus is as a townspeople. This random rhino ran through town and ran over a cat, but no, we're gonna focus on the cat. That's the important thing right now. And it's kind of like you're in this moment where something crazy is happening, but you're not really acknowledging it, focusing on it. You're kind of like, you can't see it. They didn't see, you know, this rhino.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Tyler.
Yeah, and even just if you just look at relationships in general, like the whole like relationship between Daisy and Berenger, specifically in the last act, like you see the entire span of a relationship
Yeah.
in that last act from beginning to end. And it is, I won't say in full disregard to what's going on to the rhinoceros epidemic that's happening, but we are fully focused on this relationship, a relationship that we possibly rooted for because we knew that Berenger had a crush on Daisy. But when it comes to that last end, we're like, oh my God, he finally gets her. This is where it ends and it's happy. But we fully see the beginning to the end of a relationship of like, wow, I think I like you. I think I like you too. I love you. I love you. Then the bickering, then the, you know what, you're wrong. And I personally, I genuinely believe that if the rhinoceros were not a part of this, it still would have ended the exact same way because that's just the nature of people interacting. Like whether there are distractions in there to take our focus away, no, the problem and the matter still is at hand and is still relevant. So I continue to believe that that whole thing is a distraction to make us as the audience believe, wow, this is going to be a happy ending. Neither of them believe in the turning of being a rhinoceros, but it doesn't end that way. We think
Mhm.
this is going to be the end because they're together at last, because that's what Berenger most wants. But as time tells, and as relationships clearly go, she leaves and joins in the Rhinoceros clan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great thing. The one that I think about is in scene 2 when they go to when Berenger goes to work and you see the relationship of Botard and Dudard and Mr. Papillon, where Botard is like, "Yeah, of course there was a rhinoceros in town. Did you not hear people talking about it? It's in the newspaper." And Duddard's like, "No, I don't." Sorry, Duddard's saying about the newspaper and how it's there, and Botard just refuses flat out to believe it because he doesn't trust anything really, whether it's mainstream media or other people's words. He's like, if I don't see it with my own eyes, it doesn't exist. And it's like it ran through your small provincial French town and ran over a cat, and you can't believe that this thing happened. It's kind of crazy to think that. Shia.
I was gonna say that that scene, and actually a few of the scenes, um, or pieces of scenes, makes me like it's like it's so like how we said earlier, like it could still relate to today. Like it makes me think of like with this coronavirus pandemic, the people who are saying, oh, the news media is saying, 100,000 people died, but I don't see any dead bodies. Oh, they're saying that masks really saves lives, but really the mask isn't killing me. The mask isn't, and it's like this like like I have complete distrust of this media, and until I see it and I'm personally affected by it, I don't believe it. And that's exactly what happened with Bo Bogart.
Botard.
Bogart. Thank you. Bogart. Like until the rhino actually came into their office and was, destroying the staircase, and he actually saw. Well, at first he didn't see it. He couldn't really understand what was happening, but then he saw it with his own eyes, and then he was like, "Oh yeah, no, I didn't. I never denied it. I was told. I've been a believer since the beginning. What are you talking about? Like
Yeah.
he totally flipped the script." But it makes me think of like how people have been reacting with the virus. Until it really hit home personally, they did not believe that this virus is actually killing people, that this is a pandemic, that this is an actual issue, that we should be wearing masks. Like so. I just like as I was reading this whole play, there were so many elements that I was just like, wow, this epidemic, this rhino epidemic, is very similar and in a scary way to what we're dealing with this pandemic. So
Mhm.
I really saw how you can pull things that still relates to today.
Yeah.
Girl, I wish you spoke to my hometown in Ohio because they still don't think it's real.
Um, so now that we've kind of dropped onto that, what do you guys think the meaning of the rhinoceros transformations are?
The
Okay.
meanings of the rhinoceros transformation, is that what I heard?
Mm.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Go to town.
Oh,
I can see you ramping up.
oh, it's fascinating.
Well, I'll go first. So I had
Yeah, go for it.
I had a couple ideas because it was really interesting because obviously I really do like how the playwright kind of did this. Like at the very beginning, you really are clueless to what's happening, and the theme really like it really doesn't start hitting home to like scene 3, I think it is. Um, and I love how it's like, it kind of starts. But I started to realize, okay, people are turning into rhinoceroses. We start realizing this around scene 3, and you start thinking back to like, okay, there was the guy at the office who hasn't been to the office for a while, and his boss is like, well, this is another mark on him, and he's a bad employee for taking personal days, and how dare he? And I have to, we all have to work over, and not really caring about this man's well-being. um just I felt a little bit like it was like people kind of wanting to be free from the chains of uh the work, like not necessarily the workforce, but what society expectations are, the chains of um oh, crap, sorry, I'm having a brain fart, but like
No, it's okay.
Oh, I do it
I,
all the time. Don't you even
kind of
try.
breaking the chains of society, and the backbreaking work of being a worker, a blue collar worker, and having to know that you literally could drop dead at any minute and they're just going to replace you like that. No one really cares about your well-being, you're just another cog in the wheel. And I felt like a lot of these people were trying to break themselves from that and just trying to get back to a more like natural, almost like I don't want to say the word like savage because they were becoming beasts, but it's almost like just kind of like going back to like
Yeah.
basic instincts, like like I don't care anymore about societal pressures and what you're expecting of me. I want to go back to like what really matter at the core and trying to separate from these chains. And I feel like that's just kind of like where they were going. And the more you saw people that were turning, you realize these are people that are just kind of like fed up. And then eventually the whole town starts to, community mind, beehive thinking like this is what we should be doing. We should be, this is the right way to live. And then slowly everyone's just kind of like breaking away, but still kind of conforming at the same time, which is
Mm.
really good.
Girl, why do you think people cling to make America great again? Because
Again.
people wanted to be in their minds. I mean, again, I'm showing my true colors. Yeah, I'm a Democrat. Yeah, I'm a person who does not like Donald Trump specifically, not the not the Republican Party as a whole, specifically him.
Just
Moving on. Make America Great Again. You're clinging on to what was great about this country in the past. That's something that I think Shio like Loki was hitting on. And that's something that people really grasped to. They were like, yeah, this country not is, was really great back in the day. Back in the day of being like, again, before the Civil Rights Act, before we had before we had like the queer movement, before we had plenty of movements that influences culture today. People want to cling onto what was great about this country because it makes them feel safe. It makes them feel comfortable. And the fact that they don't feel comfortable, they become enraged, they become angered, and they turn into rhinoceroses or rhinoceri. I don't know how to actually say it as a grouping, but let's be real. Uh, so I mean, Shio hit on it like freaking nail on the board, hammering it down. I just love it. I personally do love it, and how we can put that into what's going on in this moment. People want to say that Trumpism is not a form or an idea or a moment of Nazism. But if we had continued to conform, as some people did, to what that is and let it happen, we would turn into quote unquote a Nazi society, a Nazi party, a dictatorship where, because Trump wanted to, I mean, let's be real. Trump, I'll continue on this. I will continue on this. You just take me down whenever it happens, whenever you want me to. Trump wanted to run again. If he'd won this election, he wanted to run again in 2024 because he was like, I don't think I was given the full extent of being a president from 2016 to 2020. I think I should run for president again because the Democrats robbed me of that. That is a form of being a dictator. That is a form of doing that. And if we had allowed the boisterousness of Trumpism continue, the loud trampeding of rhinoceroses running through our community, we could have allowed that to happen and possibly have formed another form of Nazism, Trumpism in itself, by allowing something like that to happen. I will get off my pedestal. I'm sorry.
And just to kind of like piggyback a little bit on that, it's like I think that's also why we can relate so much to this play, because this play was written with the whole, the Nazi marching through and all that. But like, and people today compared what Trump has done very similar to what Hitler has done in ways of coming up in politics, being really someone who shouldn't be a politician, but coming up in politics and getting the favor of the people, and playing, not playing mind games, but essentially, yeah, like doing propaganda and all kinds of like really low down dirty political stuff that essentially created that mindset in Germany, where everyone kind of believed like, yes, the Jews were bad, and it was like a very like little by little, kind of like little bit of poison at a time, that was
Mhm.
going on. And a lot of people in politics were saying that some of the things that Trump was doing is very similar to the way that Hitler was running his own propaganda and became this dictator. And I think because this play is kind of set in that setting, and we've seen in our politics today what Trump has done, we're like, this play is literally like transcending, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point.
Speak the truth, Shia. Speak the truth.
Andre?
I just wanted to make a note of something. The in and out that I heard from the play, and then how we're kind of connecting it to today, and then kind of people turning into rhinos. Um, One, I think, with a lot of politicians, even beyond Trump, or even just people, I think what happens with conformity is that you work on people's fears, and you're able to get them, like, fear mongering really just works, and it gets people to it gets the people going. It gets them to you get that power over them, and it's easy to get that power over them when you keep feeding them little lines that seem really real, and then you see little things. That's how racism works. That's how a lot of politicians run these ads that really say, look how terrible things are. And that's not a Republican thing or a Democrat thing. That's just what politicians do
Mhm.
globally.
The
And it's
human
just,
rights. Sure.
it's easy to do. And to bring it back a little bit to the, you guys were bringing up conforming, or the changes, like, why are people changing into rhinos? To piggyback off of Shield's point of people just wanting to be free, um, usually, and then everyone else turning into rhinos. Because when somebody starts a trend, when somebody becomes an individual and goes against the grain and breaks free of said fear that we've had before, once people see how trendy it is, oh, it's good now, and we can take any type of era, we can take any type of thing that has happened, major thing that has happened, and people tend to just jump on the bandwagon, and it's like political correctness. Political correctness kind of came out of fear. You're hurting people's feelings, and then the pendulum swung so far that you couldn't say anything, right? And that's similar to, like, if we're saying rhinos want to be, it's a representation of being free and not conforming to the blue collar, harsh physical work lifestyle. It And then everyone doing it and saying, yeah, we need to do this thing, and then yet it's breaking up society, it's making a hive mind all over again. It's the same thing when we did political correctness. It was like everybody's thing, you know what I mean? And I think human beings, we're just, because we're social creatures, we're very susceptible to hive mentality, and, like, if I'm not a part of this thing, I'm on the outside of this thing.
Mhm.
And that can happen whether it's bad or good, um, with any issue. So
I think that's a great point. One thing that we all kind of hit on is that Gio tapped on was specifically Mr. Booth turning into a rhinoceros and like maybe fighting against that grind and fighting against that pull of being replaceable in his job. I'm curious what you guys think about the other transformations and what that might say about the different characters' personalities. Because I definitely think Shio hit on the right idea with Booth specifically, but then you see his wife jump down and join the Rhinos, and it's like, well, she didn't necessarily have that same grind, but she clearly followed because of her husband.
Right.
And then throughout the play, we see other characters join them, and I'm just curious, like, what do you guys think would have caused those transformations? Is it all the same thing, or is it different depending on the time and their personality?
I'll start with that. When it comes to Jean, whatever the fuck you want to call him, who cares? He clearly is a person of, if he's not of an upper crust world, he has upper crust mentality. Clearly, it's very clear within how he speaks to his quote unquote friend. He clearly thinks he's better than most people, and while he is better than most people, I personally feel, and this is a personal thing, and Ionesco can judge me. Go ahead.
From
I
the
feel that
grave.
at the beginning of, I think it's Act 2, Scene 1, sorry, Act 2, Scene 2, which is the conversation between Berenger and Jean. He hasn't fully conformed to the idea of being a rhinoceros, or he hasn't conformed to being a rhinoceros. And the reason that I defend that is because Berenger sees Jean become a rhinoceros. I mean, literally, there's an entire scene dedicated to that. But when we seen Dudard or when we seen Daisy become a rhinoceros, they are just like, I'm a rhinoceros. Dudard takes an entire scene to become a rhinoceros. It's not an instantaneous thing. It's not a thing of the scene worth mentioning. Or it's not just a scene that's just like, here he is as a rhinoceros. It's a moment. It is a genuine moment. I think Jean
Jean.
was fighting with himself, because while he might be a quote unquote upper crust person, given his perception, as based on the writings, he might want to cling himself to who Berenger is, because he does, at the end of the day, love Berenger. It may not be clear, but I think that him not becoming a rhinoceros soon enough truly is the basis of all of that. Because it seems that more people who have power or are of note become rhinoceroses. And we see this entire scene of him fighting. Like, oh, I'm not sick. Oh, I'm not this. Oh, I'm not that. And even he is kind of just like, oh, rhinoceros? That wasn't a thing. Oh, we saw rhinoceros? No, that's not a thing. That's not a thing. He's trying to push down as much as possible that being a rhinoceros is a moment, that it's a movement, that it's a thing. And he doesn't want to conform or be a part of that. But Duddard pushes him. Duddard pushes him to see the truth, see what he sees, see what's going on. And John just kind of accepts it at the end. And it's unfortunate. I mean, to me, I mean, I read the role of Jean during that scene. It's sad. It's a sad moment, because as much as you want to side with your friend, as much as you possibly agree with your friend, as much as you want to be there with your friend, you can't ignore your instincts. You can't ignore what you truly feel on the surface level. What you feel on the surface level and what you feel on the inside, whether it's a human rights thing, whether it's a morals thing, are two completely different things. And I think, honestly, Jean succumbed to his surface feelings and went into being a rhinoceros, and it's painful to see. Again, this is Ionesco. This is absurdism. So who knows if that's even true?
I mean, I think the beauty of this play is you can read it.
That's not what that means.
Yeah. I think you can read it in a lot of different ways. And I do agree with you, like he gives it to his base instincts. One of the things I find super fascinating with John and his transformation is he claims to be all of these better things than Berenger. He's like, oh, I'm not an alcoholic like you are, and look at me, I keep myself presentable.
Oh,
When Berenger says, oh, come to the museum with me, Jean says, no, I need to go take a nap. And when he says, come to the theater that night, Jean says, no, I'm going drinking with my friends. He's someone,
oh yeah.
he wants to be better than he is.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think it agrees with the whole thing of like how he feels on the surface level, and then what's really going on the inside. I think that just kind of possibly affirms it. I mean, I think you have a contradiction to that, but I think it still affirms possibly what it is. Like, I'm just going drinking. Like, it's a casual thing, not a I must have it thing. Which, and at this point, it's up to the actor if it comes through that it's a necessity next to a casualness.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's a really good point with it. When it comes to some of the other characters like Botard and Bedard too, like Botard, who is so contradictory, who is so fighting against the norm, to then he changes off stage right after his boss does, and you realize like he was always going to give in once he saw the sides change.
Mm.
This is the guy who denied the existence of a rhinoceros until he saw one and then claimed he never denied it. So it makes sense that once he looks around and sees, like, oh, rhinoceroses are the thing now, he would kind of move with the wind and change over. Um, and that, of course, leads us to Siddharth, the logician, and Daisy. So I'm just curious if you guys have the what would what in their personalities may have sparked those changes.
It just sounds like human behavior. Like this, like no matter what type of personality you have, and I'm laughing because it reminds me of like that person who says I'm vegan all the time as a way of like I'm saving, animals and like I gotta tell you that I'm vegan, my body's better, like keep promoting it because because you're not a vegan and I have to
Mm.
tell you
Ah,
why I'm kind of better than you.
sorry. As a vegan, I fully feel this.
But then one day, like they keep going to restaurants and then they happen to smell the steak and smell the ribs. And you catch that person in the closet at a party with rib stained sauce all over their mouth.
Okay, wait. As a vegan, I do not agree with this because beef bothers me. But I see this.
you no, Tyler's gonna turn around and be the one with the napkin. Like I swear it was.
I
It's chick.
swear, no, it's just chicken. It's not beef. I swear.
It's
It reminds me of that, and
tofu.
It's
and I know we've
tofu.
already talked about politics a little, but it reminds me of like Lindsey Graham and like Mitch McConnell and like
Bro.
you know what I mean, like that flip of like, oh, I'm seeing my boss change. Like when you see a supervisor or somebody higher than you, you tend to follow their lead because of fear. Like you have that fear instilled in you that if
Yeah.
I don't change, I'll either be left behind or fired or let go or something, and you quickly change. So I just feel like this is human behavior. It's
Yeah. I think that's fair. And then you see, obviously the opposing force to all of this is Behringer, who, in contrast to a lot of those people, kind of knows himself through and through. Like he's not a Superman or someone who is incredibly civilized or cultured, and he acknowledges that about himself, where he's like, "Yeah, I drink because even though I don't like the taste, it makes me feel better, and I don't know about the museums because I don't want to." And he just kind of accepts so much about himself that when the time comes, he can't even find it in himself to change because partially due to stubbornness, partially due to fear, and finds himself being kind of the last man standing for being kind of true to himself. And then when it comes to
And
like the Duddards of the world, it's almost nonchalant the way that he's transformed, where he's just kind of like he's very much on the sidelines through the whole thing. He doesn't he's too shy to ask Daisy out on a date. He's not strong enough to stand up against the rhinoceroses. He's like essentially he says like, "Oh yeah, if you just stay to the side and let them pass, they won't attack you." Amazing
Mhm.
how being that blasé about it kind of leaves him as one of the last people standing, but doesn't give him the strength to stand up against them. It's almost like, you know, to put it in the historical context, it's standing by as you let the Germans take Poland and move through, and you're like, "Oh, it's fine. You just give them their space, and they won't, they won't stretch further than they said they would." And next thing you know, they're knocking on your doorstep,
Yeah.
and you are faced with being a rhinoceros.